Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King. And I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
I'm doing well, King. Good to see you on another Wednesday morning. Looking forward to jumping into our conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, I want to ask you this based off the weekend we just had. Well, even though it's Wednesday, not Monday, but I'm always curious to know where you are mentally and spiritually with regards to your energy level before we begin our discussion. So, on a general scale from 1, 0 being life sucks to 10 being life is awesome. Where do you fall within today at this moment?
Yeah, so I'm in the 9 to 10 range. Actually, physiologically, for the first time in weeks, I didn't get a great night's sleep last night. Typically, I sleep well, um, so I woke up a little bit more tired physically than I would choose to feel. Um, but in terms of getting going this morning, getting some, about 2 hours of work done before you and I get on, I'm in a really good place. I don't know if my eyes look tired, um, but other than the physiological lack of quality sleep, I'm in a really good place.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I would say I'm a 10. You know, um, Again, I look at it as a choice and I choose to be a 10. And I'm a 10 because, as an exit segue into my gratitude moment, just life, health, ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, health, sound mind, mom who's alive, has sound mind, roof over my head, food to eat, using yours, indoor plumbing, food in the refrigerator, and just again, you know, the another day to live my purpose in life and to learn. Like I said, I'm really addicted to learning now, and it's like I look at learning so differently, and I don't know if that's just age and wisdom, but I wish I had had. I love to read and discover when I was young, but I didn't have the intentionality behind learning that I do now, unless I was really interested in something. Now I force myself to be interested in something as opposed to just being, well, this is interesting. Let me look more into it. Now it's more, what can I be interested in? And that's a different kind of mindset. So I'm really enjoying this journey. So, what about you? What would you say your gratitude moments
Yeah, so even though you borrowed my two primary ones, so notice I said borrowed, not stole. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so I'm always grateful for electricity that creates the ability to have a refrigerator with mostly fresh food in it. So I have as much food as I want. I don't overeat parenthetically anymore. Um, and I'm just grateful to have indoor plumbing. I have running water, I have drinkable water. Um, and those are kind of basic things that I think we in Western society take for granted. But the majority of people on the planet don't have those two things, which is striking. But if you think about the 8 billion people, they don't all have a refrigerator with food in it, or indoor plumbing. So I'm grateful for those two creature comforts. And I'm good, many of the things I'm going to borrow yours now, for the ability to continue to learn, for the desire to continue to learn, and for the expansion of my interest. Um, Ecology. So I'm interested in increasingly more things. And as I do my research and my reading and my listening, I find some brilliant people out there who are doing great work in the world, um, who are helping me grow into ever increasingly more comprehensive, balanced, inclusive, and by definition, complex perspectives. But it's really great to see that there are people out there who are doing that on a scale and in a scope larger than what I've been doing. So that learning process is one of the things that keeps my energy level really high. So I'm grateful for all of that.
Excellent, excellent. So, as we move through the format, um, well, actually, before we get into what our topic of today's show is, I just want to share this one little interesting um, tidbit I've learned or I've seen over the last few weeks. That is really just the shift from where people look to get their media sources. I'm just really just amazed at how quickly, or I should say, it's not quickly, but just how dominant podcasts now have become as a source of information, whether it's news, conversations, you know, and that's just to me is just really something I found to be fascinating. So I just really wanted to plug it in there, just as, like I said, because I'm always in my process of learning. I look at YouTube from a context of not only information. I call it YouTube University. You know, because there's so much information out on YouTube. I mean, so many videos, obviously, but there's some great tools from personal development to math to programming to understanding anything you want to learn. And we had that unbelievable source of information. But if you don't have the right strategy and plan, it could use you more than you using it. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that little tidbit before we get started.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did, because that's, I believe, as you and I are engaging in this conversation for over a year now, among all of the major issues that we face, and we're going to get into a couple of them in the next hour, uh, one of them is the curation uh, of the information ecology, because we have access to more information than we've ever had before, um, but it's not curated. So you have to decide what's true and what's not true, because anyone can say pretty much anything and put themselves out as an expert. Um, and so YouTube, as you said, you have to have a strategy for it, because if you just go on there and believe everything that somebody says, you're going to be in some trouble, because it's, a lot of it is um, ignorant or limited or arrogant or whatever, and then some of it is brilliant and helpful. And discerning what's what is the work, because until that's accurate, what we do or don't do around climate change or violence or bio warfare or artificial intelligence, it's not going to matter, because we're not going to agree on anything.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
the information ecology, the curation of information, and how we navigate that is a big deal. Anyway, so I don't want to go off on that. We can probably circle back around to that as we get into today's conversation.
Well, as we get into today's conversation, why don't you go ahead and walk us into today's conversation, actually?
Yeah. So thanks. So as always, we've been speaking about the October 2022 book, my book, Healing America's Narratives: The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow, Becoming More Fully Human, and specifically with shadow being that part of an individual, an organization, or in this case, a nation, that the individual, organization, or nation denies about itself, makes believe it's not there, doesn't know it's there. And we've identified the book identifies 9 elements of shadow. I'll just say them quickly: ignorance, arrogance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. Those are the things that many Americans deny about the country. And it's important to say that we're not saying America is an ignorant, arrogant, fearful, bigoted, violent, greedy, excessive, bullying, untrustworthy nation. We're saying those aspects of the nation are denied. So they're there. That doesn't define the whole nation, but until we recognize and own that shadow piece, it's going to have power over us. So what we've been doing, beginning 2 weeks ago, we started taking a deeper dive into those 9 elements. Last week, we spoke about ignorance, and there's a lot of evidence that that's one of the underlying shadow elements, that it is a foundational piece for the others to emerge. And so today we're going to speak about arrogance, how it manifests historically and currently in the United States shadow. And we'll even touch on how ignorance may help make that possible in certain examples. Yeah. So you want me to give a couple of examples? You want to jump in with something? I'm good to go in any direction you want to take it in.
Go ahead, give us some good examples of the context.
Yeah. So one of the the places that the arrogance is really um, just so clear, especially if you're able to step back from your political ideologies and just listen and watch people. So, um, the news organizations, especially what I like to refer to as the performance news celebrities. So, not the journalists, but those people who make millions of dollars a year commenting on the news. I'll just point to two of them. There are many, but if you look at MSNBC and Fox News and their commentators, um, many of them, not every single one of them, in fairness, but many of them speak into the camera with an amazing level of arrogance, where they, squiggle up there, they crunch their brow and they roll their eyes, and they're just saying things as though only, basically, with their countenance, with their facial expressions express is that only an idiot would disagree with me. Nod, nod, wink, wink. You know what I'm talking about. And what they're doing is giving either a left of center or a right of center opinion about some facts that are out there, some real news, which journalists uncover. Now, some of these people began their careers as journalists, and then lost their way. I don't know, got paid more. Um, but there's this level of arrogance, and it feeds into what I'll describe as the naivete of viewers who want to believe the world the way Fox News presents it, or the way MSNBC presents it, or the way CNN presents it, or Breitbart, or NBC, the major networks, or any of them. And that arrogance, for me, treats the viewer like an idiot. So again, I don't care if you're an MSNBC viewer or you're a Fox News viewer. If you're willing to receive that kind of nod, nod, wink, wink, if you don't believe what I'm saying, you're a fool or an idiot type of delivery, then you're basically being insulted. Because this person is getting paid millions of dollars to talk about the news in a specific way. If they don't talk about it in a specific way, they get fired or they get demoted or something. So there's this arrogance that we here at MSNBC, or we here at Breitbart, or we here at CNN or Fox or whatever, we know the truth, and we have exclusive access to that. And what I'm saying is the truth. But they're giving you nothing more than an opinion on some things that are more or less true out there in the world. And so that's a primary example of arrogance that really gets into everybody's home, because I'm going to guess that there's almost nobody who doesn't extract information from one of those organizations that I just mentioned, or at least getting clips of them from YouTube or Facebook or something like that. So that's a frightening level of arrogance. And then I'll give you one more example. If you listen to members of the United States Congress speak, whether it's in the Senate or the House of Representatives, I'll say a significant majority of them, when they speak in an arrogant way. Not all of them. Again, there are some people, I think, God bless them, who try to, wade through the muck and say things that are heartfelt, intelligent, and more or less grounded in something close to the truth. And it's not delivered in an arrogant way. But so many of them are just arrogant in how they speak publicly. And usually you can find them because they almost never do or say anything that they don't tweet. So they want to make sure that people can see and hear what they do. And right there, it's a dead giveaway. Now, I understand that if you're not on Twitter and you want to get reelected, it's harder because the center of gravity of the voting public in the United States, finds Twitter to be important for some reason. And I get that. if that's the case and you're trying to do good work, it serves you to be on that platform. So I understand that that's a dilemma that people have to face. But the level of like I know and you don't that's out there in news commentary and in elected officials' public statements is disturbing at best, frightening at worst for me.
I'm with you 100%. What I find it really be interesting about talk about arrogance, and you see it, as you said, manifest in so many different forms. I think about again the systematization that we are that govern our lives. Whether it's the healthcare system, education system, political system, criminal justice system, uh, financial system, you name it. That arrogance is really kind of embedded into each of these systems. And when you look at the majority of people who act in a arrogant manner, the system rewards you. It's designed to say the more arrogant you are, the more riches you can become, not more spiritually fulfilled, obviously. But as far as status, as far as exposure, as far as brand awareness, those things, the more arrogant you can become, the more people are gonna, identify with you. It's like uh, the expression when you want to become famous, then you got to choose between love or hate with how you're gonna go about branding yourself. Now, love is obviously much more difficult, much harder, and you got to really be someone who lives it authentically if you're going to choose that path. And very few people choose the path of love, but the hate path is very easy to, be someone who spews hate, acts hate in a manner. Like I give you an example. If we talk about media, I want to use an analogy from the sports media. One person in particular, and I'm not really criticizing him because I think he tapped into something that, again, within the system that he was able to leverage and become very successful and really spawn a whole nother um, change in direction for the way sports was done. So what I'm seeing happening in sports media now is that, as you and I grew up, where if you wanted to get sports information, you had to watch one source because there wasn't prior to the internet and smartphones and everything else. It was just really one source. There was no highlights. There was no clips. You had to watch, something like Sports Center or, I forgot the guy who had the George Michael Sports Machine, and he didn't give you his opinion. He gave you the facts. Here's how the game went, and you watched it, and you already had your team you loved, but it was very unbiased in that context. Just here's the highlights, here's the clips from what you made. He didn't tell you, well, LeBron's the best player, or Michael Jordan's the best player over Kareem. Those discussions didn't happen like that. But then someone came along like Skip Bayless, and he took it to the point where I'm going to give you my opinionated analysis. He was a journalist, you talked about before. He had a journalistic background and knowledge, but he realized that most Americans really want to hear their opinion shared. So if I come out and be hated by saying things like LeBron is horrible and really building his whole brand on talking about LeBron, no matter how crazy it may sound, like LeBron going to have 30, 24, and 10, and he'll talk about, well, the last 3 minutes of the game, he missed 3 free throws, and Jordan would have never done that. And it's like, how can he do that? But again, he tapped into that hate part. His arrogance, going back to that, helped him propel that. And it's sad because now I was listening to Michael Wilbon, who's a Washington Post columnist, journalist for years. He talks about now he doesn't even know what he is anymore. So I don't know the difference between journalism or this opinionated stuff they have me doing on ESPN. So he's torn between that because he realizes I can't be a journalist anymore in this media world that we live in and be successful because I have to now give my opinion. And for the most part, when you hear people's opinion like his, whose agenda is not to sit here and get you to love or hate, because journalists are told to trained supposedly to give the unbiased facts, then he realizes that you're not going to be as popular. You're not going to get as much clicks. And you're not getting as much clicks, then I don't know if you're familiar with how ESPN now just laid off 20 of their people. They're shifting their whole thing now to a podcast format and getting away from just talk radio and just analysts. Now they really want you to be able to have built your own audience on YouTube, so to speak, and bring that to them. So that's kind of my initial foray, I would say, into this discussion. I've seen arrogance displayed on that because that's something that, and it's really only for me doing basketball season. I'm really into sports because once basketball season ends, I don't really follow football as much as I did when I was younger. I just don't have the time to really be that much enamored of sports. So I strategically pick the sports I want, and then, basketball playoffs at a short distance. But I just say that quickly because that to me, even with my discussion with my friends, and I sit here and I watch them invest their time and energy into these arrogant sports analysts. And like, this is my favorite show. And I watch it. It's like, how can you really watch this guy talk about whether it's an individual or a team? And that's just his opinion. It's not a fact. And they get paid millions of dollars. Like, I think Skip Bayless makes like $15 million a year or some insane salary like that. And they give analysis, and all analysis are usually wrong. They give predictions about who's going to win. Yet still they're able to just come back every week and or every day and get people to watch and tune in. It's like, that to me, I just find phenomenal. But again, it goes back to the arrogance you talked about earlier. I think people are attracted to the arrogance they see in these analysis, these journalists now, as well as the media individuals.
Yeah, it continues to shift, and what that brings up for me in terms of arrogance is one of the debates that's been around for some decades now, and is that technology itself, because we're speaking in one way about technology because of the shifts, back. I'm a little bit older than you, so I remember when there wasn't even a George Michael sports machine. You had to watch either the 6 o'clock news, or if once I got old enough to, the 11 o'clock news, and you catch the sports was right around 20 past the hour before the weather, and that's where you get the local sports stuff. And there wasn't, there might be a little bit of commentary, but they had to jam all the scores in, in about, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. So, but the debate is around technology, and some people will say, well, technology is neither good nor bad; it's a neutral thing. And I used to buy that. That technology just is, and that you can use it in any way. But I'm learning, and I'm learning how to speak about this more and more. I'm not really completely articulate in it yet. But in fact, technology is not particularly neutral, because technology is developed by a small group of people compared to all the people who use it, small group of people. It's monetized. It's designed to engage us in certain ways. And then it's used in certain ways, whether it's political, whether it's athletic, sports, whether it's education, whether it's whatever, because it's used in a lot of different ways. But it's designed to engage us. It's designed for people to make money based on that engagement. And what the designers of it didn't know when they developed it, and for the most part still don't seem to know, was they had no sense of its impact, number one, on lifestyle, on sociology, on how we live. Right? Think about how we live today with these things and how we lived before they existed, one. And then two, the existence of the challenges to democracy, that, and specifically social media as a technological product, brought about. The geniuses, and I mean that literally, who developed the technology that does what, the algorithms for YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. It's brilliant technological stuff. Had no sense of the problems they were going to run into once they unleashed it into the world on the democratic process, on how it could impact people's on the ecology of information and truth, um, the impact it would have on First Amendment issues. And so, and then when they had to go in front of Congress and testify, the level of arrogance in some of the things that they would say, because suddenly they were these tech people who had no discernible knowledge base or experience in sociology, anthropology, history, or politics. And they were impacting all of those in very, very, in a highly scaled way, and even an exponential way. So, based on their technological expertise and their wonderful educations, they showed up in these public hearings, in these public settings, and in news with what I experienced as a great deal of arrogance that I would argue manifested through their ignorance of the problems that their technology either number one created or number two was exacerbating. Because they didn't know any better. They didn't know what was going to happen when they, made their initial public offering and made their billions of dollars, and how it would then be used beyond their ability to control what they had created. It was almost like Dr. Frankenstein. Oops, the creature's out there now. And in fact, the monster was more Dr. Frankenstein himself, if you read that novel, than it was what he created. But I don't want to get into that's a rabbit hole that I don't want to get into right now. So that just based on what you said with the sports bit, with how that sports commentary is shifting online, and with the podcasts, I just the bigger picture of the technology behind it, and the arrogance, which has probably been true with almost every major technology, from the internal combustion engine, and forward and backwards, where the designers, didn't really know what the manifestations of their technology, splitting the atom, for example, the mess they were creating by doing all of those things.
Absolutely. One other thing I just want to add on the sports thing too is they didn't realize that, to your point about not being ignorant of the consequences, because like I said, going back to Thomas Sowell, who said there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs. If we know all the trade-offs, like you showed your smartphone a second ago. Well, as a solution to a problem, how can you get around, have people communicate with you and go, et cetera, great solution. But then the trade-off was, well, we keep adding more technical capabilities to it. So now it's your email. It becomes your ability to navigate using a map, GPS. It becomes a way to go around and text people. So trade-off is now, and it's your source of news information. So the trade-off is you're spending more time with the screen than you ever would just a regular phone, because people thought the technology would add to that. And I just want to go to the point of how you look at, again, sports media and the monster they created when they decided, okay, there is a huge industry and an opportunity to give my opinion about sports instead of facts. Well, so now the climate has shifted again. It's, when you really understand economics, you see that every 7 years, 10 years, there's cycles. No matter what it is, something shifts, something changes, right? So now the shift has been, since these sports journalists have made millions and millions of dollars giving their opinion and being wrong, podcasts have come along, and that's why I kind of talked about that earlier. And now the new landscape is that we don't need to pay and watch journalists give their opinion. Everyone else has an opinion about it. So I can just watch you give your analysis and your opinion about it. I don't need to watch Skip Bayless. And so now they're losing viewership because more people are creating their own podcasts and saying, I have my opinion about sports, because you're wrong most of the time. When it's funny, when we talked about arrogance, I thought about what immediately came to my mind was what's the fine line between arrogance and confidence? Like, how do you walk that line, right? And I thought about Ali, and I thought about Ali when he was Cassius Clay when he came out, his bravado and his confidence, and some people would say somewhat arrogance. But the good thing about him, or what the difference between him, was that he backed up everything he said. He wasn't wrong. He didn't just go out and say I'm the greatest in the world and get knocked out in the first round constantly. He was able to back up most of the things he said, and that's what we were used to when we saw confidential individuals would be that they would back up what they say, and you get a chance to really marvel at that. But now it's gotten to the point that everybody's tapping into the arrogance thing because of the systems, and then, like I said, the politicians, the elected officials, the media journalists who sit here and on CNN and Fox who predict the elections, and they wrong 90% of the time, just as the sports journalists are wrong. They begin to lose that credibility, and so now that's again the phenomenon behind the podcast coming out. Is now more and more people beginning to say, well, why would I want to, the critical thinkers that is, or the people who see the opportunity from a business model tapping into the capitalistic system. Why would I watch CNN or Fox or MSNBC or Breitbart when I can create my own political show and give my own analysis? Now, maybe I might not be able to get the candidates to come on and interview them, but at the same time, most people don't really like the candidates. I think Donald Trump is probably one of the, again, he tapped into that love and hate. Just real quickly on this point, I was watching a YouTube interview, and they interviewed like maybe 10 or 15 of Donald Trump's supporters, and they asked them this basic question: is there anything that Donald Trump can do that would cause you not to vote for him? And it's like, no. What if he actually shot someone on the steps of the White House? Would you still vote for him? And they were like, yeah, I believe he would have a good reason for it. You know what I'm saying? So he's like the exception of where no matter what he does, his base is going to love him. I don't think any of the politicians has tapped into that kind of loyalty that your electorate and your constituents are going to hold you down no matter what you do, right or wrong. They're going to ride or die with you, so to speak. I don't think Biden has that. Most people who voted for Biden kind of wish he wouldn't run, to be honest. And they vote for Biden because he's not Trump, but not out of love for Biden. So again, just going back to the whole arrogance discussion, I think that those who really are willing to sell their soul, so to speak, metaphorically to the devil to get that fame and that awareness and tap into that true arrogant energy can utilize it, because the system's designed to elevate you to a high level. But by the same token, you can look at Donald Trump's life. Does he seem happy with that? I always make this point. I've never seen that man smile. Yeah. He seems like, he's constantly giving interviews, constantly cameras in his face, but now he has lawsuits at the kazoo. He's, now he's realizing there's a trade-off for that success he's achieved through his arrogance.
Yeah. So I love where you took that. A quick comment on Trump. I don't want to stay there, but interestingly, it's kind of I don't know if it's poetic justice or an irony, but prior to his becoming president, so prior to January of 2017, when he was sworn in, he had been involved in over 3,500 lawsuits in his personal and professional life, both as a plaintiff and a defendant. But that's his way of doing business. And there's nobody who was allegedly, but the same net worth and ran similar business to what he was doing. They took the 5 next guys who were around the same income, and together they had fewer lawsuits than he did. So lawsuits were kind of he basically always had lawyers as a way of life, because he was constantly either getting sued or suing people. And now he's having some lawsuits come his way that he would prefer didn't. And a lot of his lawyers are jumping ship, which indicates something. But do I want to also go with that? Was that ties, 2 things come up. One is, Trump's, I think, combination of ignorance, arrogance, and greed. And we're staying with arrogance right now. But he's continued to be willing to lie to that base, who I only have to say, and I don't mean this in a mean-spirited way or to be particularly deprecatory, but at some level, folks who would still want him to be president have to be dealing with either some aspect of their own shadow, denying what's there, and or ignorance, because the amount of evidence, and because there's plenty of Republicans who voted for him once who then bailed. They just saw who he really was once he was in office. So it's not that everybody in the base stayed. Thousands, tens of thousands bailed, but enough stayed. So for him to still get 70 plus million votes in 2020. So there's that play of ignorance and arrogance. The other thing I want to say, and this goes back to the sports, and this is a comment on our society, on American culture and society, that we pay, and let's just leave the athletes out of this for a second, because in professional sports, athletes are extraordinary athletes, yes, but they're in an entertainment business. Professional sports is entertainment. You pay to go watch people do something. That's entertainment. So whether it's, a concert, whether it's a basketball game, whether it's a football game, it's an entertainment business. And then there's the people who comment on it. There's the music critics for the rock or the hip hop concerts, and there's the sports commenters for the athletic events. And this country, our culture, sees fit to pay people who comment on entertainers playing a game. And again, I don't mean that in any way, a deprecatory way, to people like, LeBron James or, anybody that's in any professional sport. I'm just going to use LeBron now because we've spoken about him in the past, and he's kind of outstanding as a human being. So in no way being deprecatory towards them as I talk about the entertainment aspect. But we'll pay the people who talk about them millions of dollars a year. And best case scenario, we pay a primary grade teacher, the first people who we entrust, kindergarten would be first, or even pre-K, but among the first people we pay to nurture and help grow our young children. Depending on where you are in this country, they start out around 30 to 40K. And if they're lucky, in a really good district, they stay in for 20 or 25 years, they can break 100K if they do that every year in and year out. And they work their asses off. They don't just, the joke about working 9 to 3, that's a myth. I was a professional, teacher, high school, or nurse, what we pay nurses, whether they're emergency room nurses or operating room nurses. And we pay people who talk about the news, as a culture we do this, or talk about sports, millions of dollars a year. And our primary grade teachers and all our teachers, educators, and firefighters, and law enforcement officers. Again, if you live in a wealthy district, a wealthy town, you can make more. But there's a comment on American ignorance, arrogance, and greed. Look who gets paid a lot. Right? Because I've had to call the fire department or the police fewer than 5 times in my life. And it was primarily because when I was taking care of my mom, and it was a 911 call because of her heart condition. It wasn't like there was a violent crime going on or anything. And, they got there really quick and they were great. I spent a lot of time with teachers as a student and then as a teacher myself. And if I had to live in a world without news commentators or sports commentators, or without teachers, firefighters, law enforcement officers, nurses, that's a pretty easy choice. Yet the marketplace, which is the primary power in this country, sorry to say that to the senators, congresspeople, and president and the Supreme Court. The marketplace is the primary driver of what happens and doesn't happen here. And it's not well. It's arrogant, it's greedy, and it distributes money in a way that has nothing to do with the value of the work that people do. And to me, that's an example of the intersection of arrogance, ignorance, and greed, and probably excess too. So I'm interested in, I didn't realize that was going to come out. So I'm interested in your take on all of that.
No, I mean, I concur. As a systems thinker, and I have under my name Chief Value Creator. I'm a strategist, and I'm always looking for, despite the, thing I've said about quoting Thomas Sowell said there's no real solutions. I'm still always looking for the solution, and I now look for the trade-offs as well in some of those solutions. So I'm prepared for, that. So as you're laying that out, one of the things I've been debating is really the police issue, law enforcement, as you said. And I was really looking for, how do we really solve this issue, between law enforcement and particularly my community. But I know that it's just not my community. It's really more of an economic issue. I believe they hype up the race issue more so, because I definitely see poor whites get, abused by police as well. But I definitely know that there's also racial or racist folks who join the police force just so they can have that power over the community. So I'm not lost on that. But where I'm going with this is there's so much corruption within the police force, and most of that's due to the lack of pay they make. So I was thinking, like, as a solution, why not incentivize cops for, if you go through, 2 years with no, officer involved, unarmed man shootings or beatings, and you get a bonus, you get a raise, there should be some kind of cash incentives on that side. So for good policemen should be incentivized to be good policemen, other than you're just not a bad policeman. See, that system to me is just broken. I mean, or it's designed to work the way it's working, where you're going to constantly create a culture of, because I don't really believe you can do that job regardless of what your intentions are when you join and you stay there 20 years and then navigate through that culture without being either A, corrupted, or B, you become biased and brought into, well, this is how things are done despite how portrayed, because of how the system is designed. So I agree with you 100% that, because of capitalism and because everybody's quest to make more money and not looking at it from a conscious capitalism standpoint, at least saying the stakeholders should benefit, just not the shareholders, that you're going to have folks who pay media personalities money to talk about sports or talk about politics and not actually do the work. They can just go out and get a degree in journalism and then parlay the degree until now I can be a CNN analyst and give my opinion and get paid millions of dollars, because as long as people are watching the show and I'm getting advertised dollars, then that's all that matters. And so, as you say, we look at teachers, and you would think logically, again, to your point, logically, you would want a person who's educating your children to probably want to be a high paid position, so you can vet them better. You can hold higher qualifications. So you're going to teach my children that I expect this level of education, this level of mastery, this level of emotional intelligence, and all those things. And then to find that individual who has those things, well, you got to pay them. So it should go hand in hand. So I agree with you 100% that. But again, I go back. The system is designed to do what it's doing. I think the education system is designed to keep most of us uneducated on really what's going on. I mean, think about the fact they took civics out of school. So most people really don't understand the three branches of government. You were to take a poll on the street, just walk down the street and ask folks, what are three branches of government? And what are their response? And then if you want to take it deeper, okay, what are their roles, right? Most folks couldn't tell you that, even though we're American citizens. This is Indian candidate right now running for president. And I would butcher his name if I try to say it, but he came out, and one of the things he talks about is, he says that all kids should be required to take the same U.S. citizenship test that immigrants have to take in order to kind of get their license and move on in life. And people are like, "That's crazy. That's idiotic. You know, you're born here." But you know, if you think about it, we have to make a change. See, certain things have to change. I just want to make this point on the arrogance that I see as well, and I will really aim this at um, black leaders that talk about how the crime that happens within the black community, and they have the arrogance to believe that they have the solution for it. And what I mean by that is, like in Baltimore, uh, over the weekend, there was a block party where it was a mass shooting. 30 people were shot, 2 people died, right? Then there was shootings across all over the city as well. So, but that got the most headlines because of the number of people that were impacted by that. And where I'm going with this is that my community, we are the only community that comes out and says, well, we stand by the culture of not snitching. So don't snitch. That's looked at as being something that is worse than anything else. So that means that killers can come in our community and just kill and get away with it, and not have to worry about it. Because I can tell you right now for a fact, people in the community know who those shooters were. The streets know who those people who commit crimes are. And the arrogance of the fact that we can think we can bring about safer communities, when I'm talking about the leaders that is, without changing that cultural behavior, as you say, the cultural given of don't snitch, is idiotic to me. And that's where I see arrogance hurting our people, because we continue to elect folks who come in an office and say, okay, we need more police. Well, if you're going to have the community taught not to work with the police and hate the police, and then the police also says, well, what's the point of going into the community? What was also talked about was that community normally has 20 officers that patrol it. Only 7 were patrolling it because of how the police are vilified and hated, and the lack of police officers who want to join the force, which goes back to what you mentioned earlier about payment. So why would you take a job that has the fact that you can die, the high probability that you may even get sued if you do something that's human because of how the conditions and behaviors of a certain community may be, and then you're not paying me anything for it? So you're not gonna get the best, is where I'm getting with all this. You're not gonna get the best folks who are going to be involved, invested, and committed to justice. And that's the downside of the greed that goes along with paying media personalities and these journalists to just write about things without actually ever having to actually be a sports player, and they can get the kind of salaries they're getting and command that kind of recognition and as well as celebrity from it, when they really haven't done anything but just give their opinion and write articles about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I kind of jumped off course there. I was trying to bring it back. At the end of the day, I think it's just really all about arrogance that we're talking about, that folks believe that I can now achieve my success by the exploitation of others. Because when you give your opinion in a derogatory way, you're exploiting somebody else for your own benefit.
Yeah. No, and I love that you've mentioned, I think twice so far, Thomas Sowell's, the idea that there aren't solutions, there are trade-offs, because that's, for me, that's another way of saying, I mean, we've mentioned, briefly, at least I don't think it was on the air, but Daniel Smachtenberger's work, who's this phenomenal systems thinker who really is working what he to try to resolve, to look closely at what he calls the meta crises, because there are all of these crises emerging at the same time. And he said the first thing that we need to do, and this ties in with the idea about trade-offs, is the first problem we need to solve is how we solve problems. Because almost inevitably, when we try to resolve this issue over here, it's guaranteed to create some other issues that we didn't foresee, going back to social media and the issues it created with the democratic process, just as an example of that. But it's also, besides creating new issues, um, it's going to impact other issues. And so, Schmachtenberger's take on it is, and I'm, going to just play with his language loosely, is, there are these multipolar traps, meaning before we go in and say, this is what we need to do to solve this issue, we have to really get qualified people who will say, okay, what might be the ripple effects of that issue that we're not seeing yet? And what are the ripple effects of that issue on other issues that we're aware of, that we can see now before we move ahead with this resolution? And that's really it's systems within systems within systems, thinking that's needed for everything from global warming to violence in the streets to mass migrations due to global warming to the threats of artificial intelligence. All of these things have little tentacles that touch the others in some way, shape, or form. And the vast majority, not the vast majority, this one I'll say, I'm going all in on this one, King. All of our news commenters, all of the celebrities that make a lot of money commenting on the news, and all of our elected officials are, to use Robert Keegan's phrase, they're all in over their heads. All of us, there's not anyone in America who's not. We are, I am, you are, because of the complexity of what we face in this third decade of the 21st century, we're all in over our heads, and none of the public people are willing to admit that because they can't get reelected, or they might get fired and lose their, 7-figure or 8-figure income. But we're all in over our heads. Our cognitive development, our moral development, and the infrastructure that we have created that then recreates us through its impacts is way beyond our ability, I think, number one, to completely comprehend, and two, to really affect in a meaningful way quickly enough to resolve the direction that we're going in. And just to go, back to this, Schmachtenberger's work, he talks about looking for the third attractor, because the first two attractors, based on what's going on the planet right now, this is in America, but also beyond America, are one, a dystopia if we somehow centralize a ruling class. So there was a decision-making group that could make decisions for everyone, which in some ways would be good if they were good actors. So we could really, work on climate change and violence and different things. But that's kind of dystopian, because we've seen, in terms of, this is not funny, but if you look at history, people who get power abuse it. I mean, sorry, but historically that's true. The other attractor is catastrophe, and that's the road we're on right now, because power around the planet is decentralized. Even in this country, it's decentralized. The downside of the three branches of government, the checks and balances, makes it really hard to get things done, especially when certain things are really needed. So we're on the road to catastrophe, whether it's artificial intelligence, global warming, climate events, violence in the streets. I mean, that's already happening. The self-image of young girls, the depression, suicide, anxiety of our young people due to social media, or at least exacerbated by social media, all of that's already in play. We have the violence, we have the major climate events. We don't know when the next one's going to happen, but it's going to happen. Fire, hurricane, tornado, flood. That's already in play. So he's looking for, in a very not arrogant way, because he says, I don't have the answer to this. I'm getting pretty good at seeing how all of these issues connect. But the resolution, we need lots of really good minds coming together to begin to, try to resolve what he calls the meta crises, the crises all of the crises together are the meta crises. So that's, and the arrogance of the people who comment on the news and the people who make laws or pass judicial rulings, or who execute the laws, because they don't know. They all have very narrow fields of view that they may be good or not at. And they need to just say, okay, we're in over our heads. Let's get together and see if we can at least begin to turn the ship a little bit before we get to whether it's a waterfall, an iceberg, or whatever. But the catastrophes have already begun.
Excuse me, absolutely. Absolutely. It's such an interesting topic. Unfortunately, we reached a point of the show where we get close to bring it to an end. But I want to now, as we talk about again, I'm solution oriented, talk about what are some of the ways, because in your book, you talk about the difference between conscious and unconscious arrogance. And I want to give people a process of which they can help become aware of their unconscious arrogance, if there is a way of doing that. And then what are some of the ways that folks can become less arrogant and much more cognitive about their behaviors and how to put themselves on the path to become fully human and away from this shadow element.
Yeah, so great. So a really quick but rather time-consuming approach, but heading for catastrophe. So maybe spend some time with this. When you have a position on anything, it doesn't matter if it's gun violence, if it's climate change, if it's political polarization, if it's your view on the trans and bi communities, whatever it is, whatever your view happens to be on any issue, doesn't matter, left or right or center. Honestly ask yourself, how do I know what I know about this issue? How did I get to my position? How did I learn about whether it's climate change, gun violence, And very few Americans have primary first-person experience in any of those issues. Unfortunately, some do. People who are in the trans community do. People who have been victims of gunshots or who have lost someone to gun violence do. People who have lost their homes due to major climate events do. But the vast majority of us don't have those direct experiences. So look for some primary research. Look for how the scientists or the anthropologists or the social scientists, look for the real research on any of these issues and do some digging. Because if you only think you know these things due to what some guy on MSNBC or some woman on Fox or somebody else says, or you saw it on, God forbid, on Facebook or YouTube, check your information ecology, because you don't know anything. You're taking a third, fourth, or fifth person opinion from somebody who's getting paid a lot to tell you that. So get real curious about how you know what you think you know. Pick an issue and do some study about it. And it's not a fun thing to do. It's not easy. But you cannot just get information from social media and the left and right networks, because they're not trustworthy. I didn't just say nothing they ever say is true, but their commentary is not trustworthy. It's arrogant and it's skewed in a certain direction. So find out how you know things and do some research to get clearer to a primary source or experience. Not simple to do. It's not as much fun as scrolling on your phone and looking at videos. So sorry if I sound school teacherly there.
No, I think it's necessary. I think it's spot on. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And now we've kind of reached a part of our show where we want to give an example of someone who we believe, whether they're past or present, who has exhibited or is exhibiting fully human connections, behaviors, and qualities, so that you all can look at them as a person that you can learn from and model. And so I'll go first and throw out the person who I would say just recently I really began to, when I say recently, within the last year, read, study, and learn more about. And that's a gentleman by the name of Michael E. Hendren. He wrote the book Spiritual Capitalism.
Mhm.
And as you know, and most people who probably watch this show, at least from my network, know I've been involved in conscious capitalism for the last 10 years. And what I would say the difference being conscious capitalism is more about how you run your business, whereas spiritual capitalism is how you govern your life. And then that transcends into your business. He came out with, Michael E. Hendren came out with 10 commandments of spiritual capitalism. And I'm going to share those because that to me is why I believe this person was on the path. And again, he's someone who's very successful in business. He was able to take a company from making 12 million to $4 billion in pretty much an 8-year window. So he's been able to apply these principles successfully in business. So it's not a trade-off there. If you practice spiritual capitalism, you're going to be less financially lucrative or successful. So the 10 commandments are quickly is number one, define business as a spiritual experience. And just right there, that sets the context of how you approach business and why you get into business. Number two, you don't shrink or play small in this world. In other words, you want to see something like you're doing with the book you wrote that want to impact the world in a way that get people talking and bring about change. Dare to love and numbers will follow. Numbers of money you're going to make, but also numbers of impact you're going to have. People are going to be impacted by it as you operate from a love context. Embrace leadership as a sacred responsibility. When you're a leader, and that's what we talk about elected officials, I don't think they embrace leadership as a sacred responsibility. They have their own agenda. We see that, but you embrace as a sacred responsibility, you lead differently, and you're going to hold yourself to a higher standard the way you govern. Develop management into an art. You want to make sure that you look at how to manage, and you want to constantly have personal growth and continue a growth mindset to get better and learn from your mistakes. Empower them with ownership. So this to me is one of the key things about spiritual capitalism, the distinction, because now you are empowering your shareholders, your stakeholders with the ability of ownership and get them thinking about ownership as opposed to just being employees of their own lives. Transcend to a higher level. Number seven, again, personal growth mindset, becoming better today or tomorrow than you were the previous day. Don't take it all so seriously. Realizing that it ain't about you. It's not about your ego. And now you get arrogant, but understand that you have to begin to look at life and see the highs and lows as learning experiences. Number nine is count your blessings. Goes back to gratitude, we could talk about. And then finally, the truth will set you free. So to me, he came out with those 10 commandments. I work to incorporate those into the business that I'm teaching, the formulas I'm creating within my model, and the advocacy work that I'm doing about how to build connections with intelligent tribes. And I believe if you begin to live this way, this begins to also put you in alignment with the goals of becoming more fully human.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for mentioning that book, his name, and the 10 principles, King. So I'm going to just stay with, I mentioned Daniel Schmachtenberger, um, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about him, but he's, for me, one of the forefront researchers on the meta crises, all of the crises that we face as a species, and by default, all of the other species on the planet as well face the crises of our making in many ways. And he's a brilliant thinker, but he's also really grounded in spiritual practice. He has a big heart. His moral line is extraordinarily highly developed and really clear about where he stands morally. So you can find him. You can spell his name. It's Schamtenberger, Schmachtenberger. It's actually exactly how it sounds. It's spelled. If you know how to spell, you can spell that name. But you can also find him at the Consilience Project. I think it's .org. But a really grounded, for me, brilliant human being who's doing a really important work for the planet right now.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to thank everyone who watched the show. Willis, Vickery, want to thank you for your comment. Always great topics and a great show. Appreciate you for tuning in, and then definitely commenting as well. I want to give thanks to you, Reggie, again for writing the book in the first place, taking that step, that leap of faith, and taking the time to put your thoughts and what you saw as what needs to happen, which is we got to begin to heal America's narratives, not just say that, but also take action to get out here and then talk about it and be a force for it. And then I want to thank our listening audience for listening to this episode of Fully Human Connections, whether it's live, you listen live, or whether you watch the replay on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And wish everybody a blessed and productive week. And until next Wednesday at 10 a.m., that's all work to continue to be fully human. Thank you.